D&D has a problem. We all know the popular subclasses like the Blade Singer Wizard or the Oath of Vengeance Paladin. But did you know that some of the best subclasses created for the game are not in any of the official books? Incredible concepts like a melee sorcerer created by the D&D design team themselves that just disappeared. Bonjour! Today we're talking about some of the most popular subclasses that never made it into Dungeons & Dragons. All of them came from Unearthed Arcana, Wizards of the Coast program where subclasses are released for players to test before becoming official. Players try them, give feedback, and, if everything goes well, the subclass is eventually published in an official book. But sometimes, things don't go well. Sometimes, the subclass gets tested, fans love it, people beg for it to become official, and then WotC quietly takes it behind the shed, and... So today, we're looking at some of the most loved subclasses that met exactly this fate. First up, the Raven Queen Warlock. When you look on Reddit threads or forum posts asking for people's favorite Unearthed Arcana, a name that always comes up is the Raven Queen Warlock, which is a pretty cool name. That subclass got an explosion in popularity, not only because of the cool vibes, but also because the Raven Queen was a major NPC in Campaign 1 of Critical Role. So, with millions of views worth of advertising, as you can imagine, people really wanted to play it. Mechanically, it was definitely one of the most favorable subclasses WotC created. The idea is simple. Your patron is the Raven Queen, the goddess of death and memory, and she sends you a magical raven to help do her bidding. While perched on your shoulders, the bird is immortal and grants you dark visions and benefits to perception checks. And in battle, he acts like a regular familiar to help you, but if someone kills him, well, now you turn into John Wick and get advantage on all attacks against the monster until he dies. And instead of guns, you use Eldritch Blast. Then at level 6, you get what I think is the coolest ability from this subclass, which I often end up giving to one NPC or two in my campaigns. You can pull a Bran Stark and witness incest before becoming a cripple. I'm gonna get demonetized, so like and subscribe. No, you can actually use his power from the later seasons of Game of Thrones and merge your body with that of a raven and begin flying off. Then you get some defensive features, and finally, the ability to cast Finger of Death. Overall, this subclass is a little weak compared to the Warlocks of today, but incredibly fun. Even though the original concept never made it into a full release, probably because there were already some death-themed Warlocks, like the Undead or later the Undying one, or the opposite, I can never remember. It's not all doom and gloom at the Raven Palace, because a lot of the features from this subclass later got recycled into other ones, and Pact of the Chains gives you a super strong familiar anyway. But what if you wanted to use the subclass today? How would you fix it? Well, make sure to keep watching, because we're doing that later. Next up, we have...
Hey babe, didn't the short guy from our wedding have a book coming out?
Fuck! D&D Shorts, I forgot! And it's so cool too! Ryoko's Guide to Mythozoology is a massive tome of epic monster hunts and adventure for both 2024 and 2014. Fight multi-phase boss fights and craft a ton of magic item, prosthesis, and familiars from their corpses. They have over 26 inspiring new subclasses, 16 plus new species.
There's even a dog species. Look how cute he is.
Oh yes, very cute. They also added new mechanics for full party combo attacks, armor mastery, and more. Find new familiars and battle over 100 deadly monsters, including stat blocks that evolve in response to changes in the world. And if there was not enough content in this book, there is also a new Maker class, an ultra customizable archetype that wields the powers of monsters you defeat. There's even mech combat, so if you want to play Pacific Rim and go punch a Tarrasque with your giant fucking mech, you can! In D&D! Head over to the Kickstarter page to see the free playtest material and grab your copy of Helliana and Ryoko's Guide to Mythozoology. It's a mouthful. Link in the description. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest design crimes in 5e, sorcerers. No, not the class itself. They're awesome. That being said, they are the only spellcasting class that does not have a proper Gish subclass. For those of you who don't know, a Gish is a caster that can fight in melee. Clerics have one, the War Cleric. Bards have one, the Valor Bard. Warlocks have one, the Pact of the Blade. Even the squishiest class, Wizard, has one, with the Blade Singer. But sorcerers? Nothing. Actually, druids also don't have a Gish subclass. Shut up, go play the Symbiosis Druid from Steinhardt. Anyway, the fact that we don't have a melee sorcerer makes some sense, because they were just born with a golden spoon. They never had to train for their powers, so why would they know how to wield a blade? But on the other hand, you're telling me that of all the powers they can awaken, from draconic to celestial magic, none of them gives them the ability to slap someone real hard? Well, it's not entirely true. There was almost one. The Stone Sorcerer. I'm rock hard, baby. From the Unearthed Arcana 28, it turned your sorcerer into a wannabe earthbender. But this subclass was a bit more controversial than the previous one I mentioned, for two reasons. First, there's just not enough spells in the game to bring to life that earthbender fantasy. And second, and most importantly, even though most of the community wanted a Gish sorcerer, many people did not like the subclass. Some loved it, but many found it to be all over the place, granting a bunch of random abilities. For example, better AC and resistance to weapon damage, which makes sense to fight in melee, but then also spell damage increase? The coolest ability was definitely the Stone Aegis. Aegis? Which lets you protect your allies from harm and punch the enemies who try to hit them. One slight problem with it. Here is the math they gave to the ability. You reduce damage by 2 plus your sorcerer level divided by 4. What? What's next? A damage increase by the square root of twice your character level? This Unearthed Arcana was all over the place, even for back then. And somehow, none of those abilities synergize with the core sorcerer package. Not a single one makes use of sorcery points. Maybe due to the balance, maybe due to the theme, WotC killed the subclass and left us with a pretty horrible mess. Which means that the only melee sorcerers we have now involve multi-classing. And anyone who's played a paladin sorcerer knows how balanced they are. But what if you didn't want a multi-class? How would you fix it? I promise I'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about the last subclass on our list. The Archivist. Back when the Artificer was still in development, Wizards tested a subclass called the Archivist. The whole concept was that you brought an item to life by scribing runes on it, and it would then help you fight. Basically creating a servitor from Warhammer 40k. Yeah, we got this close to getting a Technomarine in the ending. The Archivist worked in a very unique way, where you could send the servitor forward and it would be invisible and immortal, and you could see through its senses and scout. And on top of that, it could blast psychic damage at enemies. Basically a floating Reddit modhead screaming, actually. Which, when you think about how servitors are made in 40k, humans who get brainwashed, turned into eternal slaves, and forced to repeat a task for all of eternity, not that far from a Reddit mod. Except the ones from r/Unearthed Arcana. They're cool. Fun fact, they're the reason I actually started making D&D content for a living. So, I like them a lot. Anyway, it was one of the only subclasses in the game that really leaned into the Psychic Artificer, using the machine god to bring objects to life. The Archivist starts off quite strange, because you are meant to use your servitor to scout, but it doesn't have stats. So I guess it just succeeds on stealth checks? In addition, the psychic damage it deals is really not that great. You're better off with basically any other cantrip. Then you get a form of telepathy allowing you to talk to anyone wearing one of your item infusions, and a bit better damage, but still nothing great. But then at level 14, this subclass becomes a monster. Not only do you unlock teleportation, now anytime you damage someone with your psychic blast, they are stunned, which is insanely strong. That's where you can tell that it's Unearthed Arcana. The balance is all over the place. That power curve definitely could use some smoothing out, which WotC did by flatlining it. Instead, the next book contained the armor. So rather than Wikipedia with anger issues, we got Iron Man. And I love Iron Man, but I just wish we could have gotten both. And technically, we did. But more on that in a second. I've teased you enough. Let's talk more about fixing those subclasses first. Starting with the Raven Queen Warlock. The biggest issue here, as I mentioned earlier, is that your Raven doesn't do enough. It's a glorifying Find Familiar spell. I mean, you take a whole subclass, make a deal with the god for it, and the fighter over there does the same thing with one origin feat. Bro. Instead, let's make that bad boy into a true messenger of death. First buff, we're adding a familiar swap feature where you can just teleport and swap places with your Raven on the battlefield, getting yourself out of trouble and getting your Raven in trouble. Because remember, if he dies, you get permanent advantage. I know it sounds mean, but if Mr. Beast taught me anything, it's that mean things like burning people alive are fine as long as you do it for money. And advantage is the currency of battle in D&D. Second buff is to give your Raven the ability to curse enemies to make them weaker to your spells, which makes you that much more terrifying. And final buff, you can now summon your Raven more often. Now, what about the Stone Sorcerer? I, for one, really like the Earthbender fantasy, and I think it will make for a great gish. But like I said, that would require not only fixing the subclass, but also adding a bunch of spells to the game to support it. And that's where you realize that the D&D community is awesome. Kibbles Tasty, a legend of D&D homebrew content, released a ton of free spells for D&D, including earthbending spells. So that's problem 1 solved. Now for the subclass. Well, Kibbles gives us a solid foundation on which to build. The most important is that it needs extra attack at level 6, the same that Valor Bards or Blade Singers get. Otherwise, it can't keep up. The math also needs to be changed from the horrible formulas they gave us, so changing that to proficiency bonus reduction. And finally, you'll remember that I mentioned Paladin multiclass. Well, the original subclass gave you access to smite spells, which is not super on theme for I cast rock, but somehow it's also divine smite. Weird. So instead, let's tie the subclass into the actual sorcerer class and make use of sorcery points. You can expend sorcery points to reduce damage, and if you do, you gather the remaining stone around you to enhance your next strike. We made both the reduction and damage 1d8, which splits the damage of a divine smite and spreads it in between offense and defense. We do this because one sorcery point is a bit less valuable than the first level spell slot needed for a smite, but defense is a bit less valuable than offense in D&D. So, by splitting the 2d8, we stay balanced and on theme. Slap on a gliding speed to burrow under the earth, and we're good to go. Now for our final fix, the Artificer. Remember when I said Wikipedia with anger issues? Well, we technically got a subclass that did that. Almost all of the ideas of this subclass ended up being ported over to another class, the Order of Scribe Wizards. It copied every single feature from the Archivist except the stun at level 14 and the mental blast damage, which can easily be replaced by a psychic cantrip. And here I was complaining about the power curve being all over the place. Well, they sure smoothed that out by giving it to a wizard. It's like saying a gun is too dangerous in the hands of a rookie and instead giving it to the fucking Delta Force. Congratulations, what could have maybe killed a man or two now can instead topple an entire government. Due to that, I will not rework the subclass, unless there is a big demand for it in the comments, because it already exists as a wizard. But you can find all of the reworked subclasses in the description below for free. Arrivederci.